Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're taking a look at, again, one of the most special watches we've ever seen on this channel, and that is the Rolex Day-Date 40 in platinum with the diamond bezel and also the super rare green or olive green Arabic numeral dial. We reviewed this watch a little while ago, or a couple of weeks ago, in the ice blue dial. So if you've watched that video, you kind of know roughly what I'm going to talk about, but I will change it slightly to tailor it for the green dial, of course. But as with that video and all my other reviews, let's go back in time and take a look at the history of the Day-Date, and we'll also take a look at the history of the Arabic dial too. So going back to the 1950s, specifically 1956, Rolex released the Day-Date as a watch specifically aimed for higher end clients. It was only available in precious metal as well, and also featured kind of special dials with different experimental materials, diamond dials, etc, etc. So it was definitely aimed at a much more high-end audience than a Submariner or a Datejust was. The watch was in 36mm case size, which is kind of the average case size for Rolex back then. It was also, of course, more complicated than the Datejust back then as well, featuring the day function as well as the date. So it was a pretty special piece, definitely aimed at the higher end side of Rolex's client base. The watch was, of course, worn by presidents, the Day-Date, and also various other very important people over the years, as well as just normal clients that were just on the higher end of the Rolex spectrum, really. Many different experimental dials, like I said, over the years, wood dials, kind of special gemstone dials. Moving on now to 2008, which is when we saw the release of the Day-Date 2. So there was a huge run, basically, of that 36mm case size for the Day-Date. In 2008, we saw the Day-Date 2, and that featured a 41mm case size, which was a huge jump up in case size versus the 36. The watch really prior to the Datejust 2 Day-Date 2, sorry, was designed for like I said, a higher end client, but often a client that was slightly older that wanted a more classic style watch, a smaller case size, precious metal, definitely just a smaller, more classic timepiece, versus someone who was looking at the deep seas or a more bulkier, larger piece, a more sporty watch. This was definitely aimed at a more classic audience. So the fact that Rolex changed that watch from a classic case size to a very large, arguably over large or too large 41mm case size was really crazy. And at that time, not that many people were buying large watches. But it really did well with the pop culture, kind of the celebrities of the world at that time, as yet again, it was still the best way, the ultimate way you could show your wealth. Not only can I afford a Rolex, but I can afford the most expensive watch from Rolex, and that is the Day-Date, because it's only available in precious metals, sorry. Later on, we saw the release of in 2015, specifically, the release of the Day-Date 40, which was a 40mm case size, which is a much cleaner, kind of more subtle, more classic, much more true to the original 36mm in terms of proportions than the 41mm Day-Date 2. The Day-Date 40 was therefore much more popular at the time, became more sought after, and sold eventually for well over its list price as a result of being so popular. And then 1 year later, in 2016, we saw the release of a very special Day-Date 40, which was the 60th anniversary for Day-Date. And that was a special series of green dials available, specifically in platinum, rose gold and white gold. And they are truly stunning dials. The rose gold green dial or olive green dial is one of the most popular watches from Rolex, incredibly difficult to get hold of. But this green dial, especially paired with this Arabic numeral dial, is incredibly rare, and even more rare to see it in combination with this diamond baguette bezel as well. So that takes a look at the history of the Day-Date. Let's take a look briefly at the history of Arabic dials. So in the 50s, just shortly after the watch was released, Rolex started to create Arabic dials, and the first Arabic dials were where the day was actually written in Arabic script, but the date was written in a Western you know, as Western numbers, standard Western numbers. And then later in the 50s, we saw the first example of a almost full Arabic dial, and that was the 6612 reference, 6612B reference specifically of the day-date, which featured Arabic days and also an Arabic date. It had diamond dial as well, diamond markers, and it was in full platinum. It was an incredibly beautiful watch that married perfectly to a Middle Eastern client, or worked perfectly for a Middle Eastern client because it was in platinum and therefore was not against Islamic tradition or religion. And the diamonds on the dial, of course, another way you could show your wealth. So even though a non-discerning eye or someone who may not know about that watch wouldn't necessarily know that it was an expensive timepiece because it was in a colorless metal like steel or white gold, and the diamonds kind of added that more special kind of zing to the piece, really. And then again, also in the late 50s, there were some really rare examples where Rolex actually completed the full Arabic dial by adding Arabic numerals as index markers instead of just standard batten index markers. And there were only a couple of these ever released. It was a really rare watch, very hard to find even nowadays. But it wasn't until the reference 1804, which was released in 1961, where we saw a full proper Arabic dial from Rolex. And that featured Arabic script for day, Arabic script for date, and also Arabic numerals as index markers around the watch too. This full Arabic set, or three-way set, or dial, was then discontinued in the late 70s and then wasn't actually reintroduced until 2016, which is when we saw the release of this specific watch we're looking at today. And that was a really special release because for almost 40 years, the Arabic market was not able to get an Arabic numeral dial from Rolex. Again, throughout this whole process, this Arabic dial was always upon request from Rolex. You couldn't actually buy it as a stock item from the Rolex website or the Rolex collection. You had to request an Arabic numeral dial. So this was a super special example. Not only was it released at the 60th anniversary of Rolex, but it was a special mark or milestone in terms of the Middle Eastern audience. So that makes this watch that we're looking at today even more special because not only is it a green dial, it's also the first year they reintroduced the full Arabic dial. Or Rolex as a brand only offers Arabic numeral dials on platinum timepieces, of course, as a nod and a kind respect to the Islamic tradition that you cannot wear gold. That concludes the history of the day-date and also the history of the Arabic numeral dials. Let's take a look now at the features of this watch. We're going to start, as always, with the clasp. The clasp on this watch is a stunning concealed clasp with just a crown logo as your kind of little release on top of the bracelet. It is so beautiful, very comfortable, feels incredibly solid and stiff when you first get it. Lovely clasp on this piece. I really love how Rolex incorporated a completely concealed clasp just as to not disturb that beautiful bracelet and kind of continue that on as like a piece of jewelry. So that's really cool. Moving on to our bracelet as well, we've got a presidential bracelet on this watch which features brushed outer links, polished center links, which looks stunning, of course, in the platinum as well. It has just a lovely glow and life. It's also got fully solid links as well, which means again it won't stretch. The ceramic inserts mean as well that it won't wear out over time and slowly start to bend and move. So a very hard wearing bracelet to match the oyster bracelet, which of course is a staple piece for Rolex watches for many years. Platinum variation of this presidential bracelet is incredible. It feels absolutely stunning on your wrist because the weight of the bracelet just means it wraps itself around your wrist in such a magical way. It sits so perfectly and just falls on your wrist. Moving on to our case, I love the way the case and the bracelet interacts on this watch. I love the way that Rolex has designed the bracelet to just seamlessly continue into the case and not disturb that design or alter that design as it enters the case. I love the kind of elegant long lugs on this watch. It is a very elegant classic looking timepiece, very similar to the 36mm. So that's really lovely, and I think that's why we're seeing more and more popularity with older clients that are buying this Day-Date 40, because they appreciate how classic this piece is and how it is perhaps the modern equivalent of what they had back then. The case is of course in 950 platinum, super rare, and in all polish finish, looks absolutely beautiful, really lovely sharp edges. The bezel on this watch is of course a stunning baguette handset bezel. All those baguette diamonds are hand matched together and hand set together to create this seamless, beautiful, beautiful bezel. It's really, really rare to see a day-date, full stop. Even more rare to see a platinum day-date. In fact, incredibly rare to see a platinum day-date. But even more rare to see a platinum day-date with a diamond bezel, and exceptionally rare to see one with all of that plus an Arabic numeral dial, and even more rare on top of that to see a green dial version. So this is a real treat for everyone today. Of course, this watch is worth £250,000, 250 grand, and growing daily. So there's no question that this is one of the most rare and expensive watches from Rolex that you can get. Moving now on to our dial, which is of course the centerpiece of this watch, with incredible, beautiful, beautiful platinum Arabic numerals. I actually prefer this dial to way more so than the ice blue dial, purely because I think these platinum hands and platinum index markers look better than the blue on that dial. I actually think this just looks more expensive and ties in really beautifully. And the green on this dial is utterly incredible. It's one of my favorite dials that Rolex offers. In fact, not just Rolex, the whole of the watch industry. I think the green sunburst effect is stunning. I love it on the yellow gold Daytona as well. And of course, this the Day-Date 40 in all its iterations, the green dial, the white gold and the rose gold, and this platinum being the ultimate version. Those stunning platinum Arabic numerals, the way they float on the dial is just truly magical. I absolutely love it. I love the Arabic script in the day window and also the date window. Again, it just has this kind of magical feeling that the normal Roman indexes just cannot capture. It is such a beautiful dial, and the green is just setting it off in such a stunning way. It complements the diamonds and also the platinum far better, in my opinion, than the blue. And of course, this being the 60th anniversary green dial, and also making it the anniversary, almost 40th anniversary of Arabic numeral dials, this is an exceptionally special dial, an exceptionally special combination of bezel, metal and dial and numerals, making this piece one of the most special watches you can get from Rolex by far. In fact, it's one of my dream watches. I think it's such an incredible piece. Which brings me on to whether or not I would own this watch. I would for sure own this piece. I mean, even though I'm not from the Middle East, I would definitely own this piece purely in the fact that I think the Arabic numerals totally change the way this watch looks and gives it a whole different image, a whole different magic that the Roman numerals cannot capture. I think even though I couldn't read it, the actual day writing, I would probably try and learn just so that I could understand what it says, because that ancient script is so utterly beautiful. The way Rolex has designed the script on the dial almost looks as if it's been hand painted onto the dial. In fact, when I first ever saw this watch, I genuinely thought that they were hand painted. So for sure I would own this watch. 1000% I would own it with the green bezel as well over the blue. I genuinely think this is one of my dream watches. It is the epitome of stealth wealth. So that concludes my review on this incredible Day-Date 40 with the green Arabic numeral dial and the diamond bezel in platinum, of course, the ultimate Day-Date arguably that you can buy on this planet. Let us know in the comments if you would own this watch or the blue dial, or what you would do with £250,000 if you had that to spend on this watch. Would you spend it on another watch or a combination, a whole collection? You could make a pretty incredible collection for the same price as this watch. And as always, if you're interested in this watch or any other watch in the Rolex collection, it'd be a pleasure to call this watch into stock for you or help you in any way we can.